Delmarva Beauty from Above is brought to you by Johnny Janosic World of Furniture in Laurel and Dover. We hope you enjoy the view. There's only one place where you can hear the gentle sounds of nature and witness serene beauty that'll take your breath away. It's a place where watermen and wildlife depend on one another to survive. And where agriculture thrives across open fields. It's where ponies roam free and eagles soar for as far as the eye can see. 14 counties, 3 states, 1 Delmarva. Only from our eyes in the sky, Skycam 16 and Chopper 16, can you truly see what this peninsula has to offer. Hi, I'm Captain Willie Dykes, and this will be one of the few times you'll be seeing this peninsula from ground level, because you're about to see Delmarva from the best view possible. Welcome to Delmarva Beauty from Above, where you're going to get the seat of a lifetime, seeing the miles and miles of tranquil territories that surround this peninsula. An aerial advantage, and it's only from up here that you can see all of Delmarva. Delmarva is a peninsula rich in history and culture, sitting between the Chesapeake Bay and the Atlantic Ocean. And in the southern portion is ACCOMACK County, a narrow strip of the peninsula with winding rivers, undisturbed beaches, and small towns looking forward to the future. ACCOMACK is 455 square miles, but it's the natives that first called this area home before the English explored the Chesapeake Bay. Towns like ACCOMACK were named after the Native Americans who coined the phrase ACCOMACKY, meaning across the water. But on the land, the natives lived off of crops, and agriculture is still a way of life on Delmarva. It's done a little differently than back in the day, but growing corn, beans, and wheat is a tradition of Delmarva culture that won't be going away anytime soon. Of all the barrier islands that border the eastern coast of Virginia, there's one that tops them all. For over 70 years now, NASA Wallops Island Flight Facility blasts off into exploration. The facility is one of 5 launch pads in the country, but Wallops isn't the only island acknowledged with national recognition. Heading northbound truly shows the rough nature of coastal storms. Assateague Island, an astounding wonder of what life was back in the day. During the 1800s, it was a time when people on the island worked as boatmen for the U.S. Coast Guard. But there is one inhabitant that has lived through it all. The Assateague wild ponies have grazed these lands since they were brought here in the early 1600s. There are a couple of theories on how they got here by the early settlers, but make no mistake, this oasis is where they call home. For some, the island was a natural pasture for livestock, and so the herds were left roaming the north and southern parts of the national seashore. Every year at the end of July, these ponies on the south end are rounded up to cross the Assateague Channel onto Chincoteague Island, where foals are sold to control the population, and then they head back for another year, roaming free at peace. But traffic gets a little heavier as we head into the iconic Ocean City Inlet. Assateague Island was once connected here to its northern counterpart, that's now the bustling Ocean City. A storm in 1933 ripped through, changing the course of history and creating this inlet that's now used every day for waterborne traffic. This 200-foot wide channel sees traffic by the boatloads. But whether you're painting a picture or cruising back from the coast, it's an amazing thought that such a cataclysmic event turned into such a convenient pathway to the ocean for the folks here in Worcester County. A little further up the coast, we find our first line of defense. Standing guard and taking watch, these fire control towers were built to defend Delaware. Stacked in the sand dunes of Cape Henlopen State Park, they were equipped with instruments to determine the range and angle of enemy ships offshore. Lying under the banks and overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, Fort Miles played a key part in America's call to action. Unbreakable, unstoppable, and sitting submerged among the sand dunes is the iconic Battery 519 in Artillery Park. The gun battery spreads into a 15,000 square foot underground chamber to defend the ports of Wilmington and Philadelphia, one of Delaware's historic hometown heroes. Two lights, one purpose. As ships cross into the Delaware Bay, their last line of defense is also their only light in the night sky. The first guided sailors around the Delaware Breakwater. This East End lighthouse sits as a second line of sight before the harbor of Refuge was put in place to protect the larger vessels from the underwater drift as they head up the Delaware Bay, which is also where we're headed, north, up through Delaware. Over 10,000 acres. A popular stop along the Atlantic Flyway. A breathtaking sight from a bird's eye view. But the first wildlife refuge in the first state is beautiful Bombay Hook. These 12,000 acres of tidal salt marsh stretch across 8 miles of Kent County. Salty wetlands that now provide a habitat for humanity and wildlife to coexist. We're getting near the end of our day. The Chesapeake and Delaware Canal is named after the bodies of water that it connects. Cutting through CECIL and Newcastle counties, it was made for the broader picture, to transport and expand economic growth for industries coming to the New World. What we call a peninsula is technically an island in itself. Water surrounding Delmarva on all sides. The Atlantic, the Chesapeake, the Delaware Bay, and finally the C&D Canal. But as the sun slowly dips out of sight, it promises to bring forth a journey tomorrow that will soar through the heart of Delmarva. A new day dawns on another adventure across the vast lands of small towns and farm fields. This time we start where we left off in northern Delmarva, smack dab in between Delaware and Maryland. Following the fields here could lead you all the way to Virginia, but there are more important things to see first. Planting and watering these crops is a summer job with a plentiful reward. And as the stalks grow across Kent and Caroline counties, we encounter one of the little towns that were just too big for one state. Marydel and Delmar. Their names say it all, two towns that represent the larger peninsula community. Delmar, between Sussex and Wicomico counties, was the first to forge the names together in 1888. Towns like these are the reason why Delmarva is a household name and why we have become one united peninsula. As we continue to fly southbound, we see the beginnings of Delmarva's largest and longest tributary to the Chesapeake Bay. It's the Choptank River, slowly meandering south, tucking and turning through 4 counties, supplying waterborne transportation for 71 miles before dumping its reservoir straight into the bay. But the Choptank gets a boost from a little-known waterway. Tuckahoe Creek is mostly bordered by wooded marshlands, but it starts out all the way up at this lake in the Tuckahoe State Park. The park is a place for everyone looking to get outdoors. From cabin camping to the canoes, escaping to this natural getaway is a peaceful place for people in Maryland. Here, people can enjoy nature's most pristine beauty in the most abundant of ways. These trees encompass nearly 500 acres of the Tuckahoe State Park. This native garden continues to thrive and spread its roots at the Adkins Arboretum, named after the Adkins family of the Eastern Shore, who founded this mission to plant all types of Maryland forestry. By the 1990s, the people of Delmarva can find over 600 plant species native only to this peninsula. But there's one Delmarva native that many know across our great nation, and he was born south of Hillsboro along the banks of Tuckahoe Creek. An abolitionist, an author, and African-American statesman who fought his way to bring social equality for everyone. His name was Frederick Douglass, a man who escaped slavery from a plantation that once stood here around the Kentucky Ravine. But he left to start a new life with greater importance. But people here know that his work created equality for all. Douglass used this creek on a daily basis, and now we follow in his footsteps as we head to open water. As we cut across the Little Choptank River, we meet up with the most diverse wildlife refuge that you can find in Dorchester County. The Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge contains 1/3 of Maryland's wetlands and was made for migratory birds that travel the Atlantic Flyway. 250 species of birds live here, including the greatest concentration of our national symbol of freedom. The bald eagle soaring into view with a 7-foot wingspan. These flyers transcend what it means to be the bird of prey. Seeing them is a great sign for not only the Blackwater's health, but also their breeding population. You can find them soaring above or scanning the refuge right here from their treetop terrace. Just along Greenbrier Road, you'll find the area that Harriet Tubman grew up in. And little did she know that she would be a leader for African American slaves across the entire country. Just a little further down this road, it took one moment that would change her life and the life of many others. It's here in Bucktown that Tubman attempted to help another slave as her first public act of rebellion. While she was punished for revolting, the experience laid out the foundation for the Underground Railroad to freedom. Another tributary that has a vital role in the Chesapeake Bay can be found here in Sussex County. The Nanticoke River stretches for more than 60 miles, starting in Delaware and flowing through towns like Seaford and Blades. As we meander down the water's edge, the river widens and people start trying to find a way to get to the other side. The crossways of the woodland area is where you'll find an old cable ferry taking people from one side to the other. It's a picturesque river ride that's part of their daily commute. It was the Nanticokes that once ruled these lands from the bay to Delaware, traveling over 700,000 acres of watershed. But the natives learned quick that this wetland world between Wicomico and Dorchester counties shows its natural tidewater tricks as the river banks left and right. Back and forth. Passing by villages. And arriving at its final destination, the Chesapeake Bay. But it doesn't supply the bay with fresh water all by itself. Another river comes in from the east to help feed the needs of the bay. The Wicomico River is much smaller and flows with a gentle ease. But it's the population of the people that gives it the name Wicomico, which comes from the Indian words Wicomico, a place where houses are built. The most populous city on Maryland's eastern shore, Salisbury, Maryland, is where you'll see this tranquil tributary start to rise and make its way to the southwest. Waterway activity hits its peak as traffic takes over this 24-mile spread of water. The end of a day on Delmarva means another commute. The upper ferry sits just outside of Salisbury. And to the south, we find one of the nation's oldest ferries still in operation. Started in 1688, the Whitehaven ferry carried people to the colonial town of Whitehaven, with a great lookout as the river continues its way to the bay. This tidal estuary then sends us out into the Tangier Sound. We begin to enter Somerset County, but we still have a few minutes of daylight left in our day. Crossing the bridge, we enter the waterman's town of Deal Island. This 3-mile piece of land embodies what it means to live off the water. We've gone through the heart of Delmarva, but as the sun dips out of sight, it radiates a glow across the bay. The glow of a new day springs to life tiny little Tangier Island in ACCOMACK County. This island boatyard is empty right now because the day has already begun for most watermen. But for the town of Tangier, Virginia, it's another day their island slowly slips away. Year after year, the island has crept into the bay. These seawalls are built to block the island from eroding away any more than it already has, but they have a long way to go and not much time to do it in. A brand new morning brings more than just scarlet skies across Somerset County. Some watermen are just starting their engines for a morning commute in the Chesapeake. As the bushels reel in by the boatloads, it's no wonder why they call this the crab capital of the world. Crisfield Seafood is the best in the business, and they've got the reputation to prove it. To the west is another one of our historic Chesapeake Islands. Three communities with three ties to the history of Smith Island. We begin with the smallest settlement, Rhodes Point. At one time, pirates used to raid ships passing by, but now its image is getting a lift out of the water. Rhodes Point is now home to the island's marine railway. The second community is Tylerton, a ferry ride away with its signature slice of Smith Island cake. Since the 1800s, families would send cakes for the watermen who left for the autumn oyster harvest. A season at sea full of layers for each day away. Number 3 is the largest of them all, Ewell, the island's boating hub. Getting there is only by water, and as you can tell, there's no shortage of space at the docks. But the tale of three continues as we head north. Our next stop at Hooper's Island is barely bridging the pieces together, where the rough waters of the Chesapeake begin to spill into the island's chain link. What was believed to be the oldest area of Dorchester County, the Hooper family has found a way to keep their heritage alive, one generation at a time. Following the clouds that cover the sky takes us into Talbot County. Tilghman Island, a trip that's worth a boat ride to wait for. These islanders only ask that you stay to enjoy their succulent seafood, but if not, it's considered just water under the bridge. Crossing open waters isn't just for those that utilize the Chesapeake's guidance back to the mainland. Flyers from Central America come up to this familiar breeding spot to lay down a new generation. Osprey partners are said to mate for life and will typically use the same nest every year, commonly found on channel markers. Life on the water gets busier in the middle of the afternoon, especially near the port of St. Michael's. But just around the river bend, we can see why we call this area a tidal estuary. The flight up the western side of Delmarva picks up another major tributary to the bay, the Chester River. About 43 miles long, it forms the border between Kent and Queen Anne's counties. And it gets its name from historic Chestertown, the only Chesapeake port where colonial ships could dock because the Chester was the only river with safe underwater terrain. But this tributary is only one piece of a Chesapeake puzzle. Along its eastern side, this bay feeds off the estuaries that give it life and are vital to Delmarva's past, present, and future. And getting across the bay is just a drive between one shore and the next. The Chesapeake Bay Bridge. Spanning 4 miles. Uniting the people and making connections to each side. More than 50 years ago, at the time of its completion, it was the largest steel structure over any body of water in the world. And now it has doubled in size and significance to our home. This bridge transfers thousands of vehicles every day and millions of people every year. Just another way to bridge the gap, connecting Chesapeake's shoreline and welcoming the rest of the country to our peaceful peninsula. But for you, Delmarva sits right in your backyard. We've flown for days and witnessed natural beauty from up above. Thanks for taking a ride with us, and we hope you'll join us for another flight across this marvelous peninsula. Because as you can tell, there's never a better view or a better sight than from our very own eyes in the sky, Skycam 16 and Chopper 16. Delmarva Beauty from Above would like to thank Johnny Janosic World of Furniture for having the best seat across this peninsula.